Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. So I never actually did an ultimate guide to Yelan back in the day, so here it is. We're finally going to do a full character guide for Yelan. Now Yelan's rerun came a little bit earlier than expected. I think many people were expecting Shenhe to be before Yelan, but here we are. Yelan is finally here, and what better way to celebrate than to make a guide video explaining everything that I know about this character. So let's just hop right into the goods, and we are going to start with the most important part of her kit, which is her elemental burst, the Depth Clarion dice. What you need to know about this is that it completely scales off of only her HP, so no amount of attack will actually affect her damage here, and it is only based on her hit points. And it also applies 2 units of Hydro with this first hit that does 50.53% of her max HP. This is useful for certain rotations, in particular with international variants, to double swirl both Pyro and Hydro. Now the next thing to know about her elemental burst is that after you use it and you use any normal attack command, like you mash your left click on your mouse button, then it will fire a wave of exquisite throws, which shoots 3 of these things that each deal 10.35% of her max HP. Now over the duration of her elemental burst, you can get 15 entire exquisite throws, so in total you will have 45 times this 10.35% multiplier when it comes to her exquisite throws. Do keep in mind that mine is at level 13 because of her Constellations, but you can obviously bring yours up to level 10 at Constellation 0. And with the cooldown of 18 seconds as well as her burst animation taking 1.5 seconds, really you basically don't have any downtime on this thing because the last exquisite throw also happens at the tail end of her burst animation. So in other words, yeah, you basically have 100% uptime when you factor in her elemental burst animation as well. Finally, it's 70 energy cost, which is a reasonable amount of energy cost for this elemental burst, for how strong it is and for the cooldown as well as for the amount of particles that she generates. Her second passive also boosts her elemental burst's effectiveness, because when her burst is active, it will provide 3.5% bonus damage up to 50%. So near the end of her elemental burst, at around the 14 to 15 second mark, you will have a 50% damage bonus to the on-field character. Now her next ability is her elemental skill. Her elemental skill is literally one of the best things that you can have for exploration in Genshin Impact. It is probably the fastest form of ground movement in the entire game. And one more thing about this that's important is that during her elemental burst, using her elemental skill and hitting an enemy with it will trigger the elemental burst's exquisite throw. The cooldown of it is independent from the cooldown on the elemental burst's exquisite throws. So depending on your rotations, you can actually get 2 to even 4 free waves of exquisite throws on top of the usual 15 exquisite throws. Last and certainly the least, at least for most players, are her normal attacks, the stealthy bow shot. Now this scales off of her attack, so you're not going to be doing much damage with her. However, she also has a breakthrough barb, which is indicated by her glowing bracelet. This breakthrough barb charges very quickly, does an AoE attack like that, and it also scales off of her HP, and it also recharges every 5 seconds when you're out of combat. And on occasion, it's useful for finishing off weak straggling overworld mobs as well as to slightly increase Yelan's damage output during her elemental burst if you want to min-max all your damage output. And one more small bonus thing is that there is a 34% chance for her elemental skill to reset the cooldown even during combat of her breakthrough barb. And lastly, I want to mention that her passive 1 increases her HP based on the different amount of elements in her team. So if you have 4 elements in her team, you get 30%, 2 elements, you get 12%. But honestly, it's not worth building your team around this component of her kit. Just think of this as a nice little bonus for Yelan's damage. Now in terms of talent priority, for most people, especially at Constellation 0, you're going to want to prioritize her elemental burst above all else. After that, you can level up her elemental skill, and for honestly Constellation 5 and below Yelan's, you don't even need to level her basic attacks, but you can bring them up a little bit to increase her breakthrough barb damage. Now, if you are at Constellation 6, I would prioritize Elemental Burst and then basic attacks being roughly equal, and then finally, lastly, leveling up her elemental skill. But as you can see, my Yelan's at Constellation 6 and she is triple crowned because everything in her kit makes a big impact when she's at Constellation 6. Now, let's next talk about her artifact choices. Honestly, when it comes to her artifacts, I think there are only two meta choices for her. The first one is the 4-piece Emblem of Severed Fates for obvious reasons. You want to give her a lot of energy recharge to have good burst uptime, and because of that, you will gain a lot of bonus damage on her elemental burst thanks to that. We can see based on this chart that the Emblem of Severed Fates will boost her elemental burst damage by about 21% in comparison to having no set bonus at all. And another great set to use with her is actually the 2-piece Tenacity plus 2-piece Heart of Depth. And this provides 15% Hydro damage as well as 20% HP. Yelan scales very well off of her HP, so that's why you'll see that this actually does increase damage by a lot. But of course, this isn't as good in terms of burst uptime and energy sustain. Now, this combination is also much better for her Constellation 6 because, as you can see, it improves her breakthrough barb damage significantly, and it also improves her elemental skill damage while still maintaining a competitive elemental burst damage amounts at 117% in comparison to 4-piece Endless Sever Fate, which is at 121%. And you can consider using her with the Flower of Paradise Lost or a max EM build with Gilded Dreams if you are running her in, for example, a Nilo Bloom team or a Fridge team. However, you do want to still have plenty of energy recharge in that situation, so do keep that in mind. But for the most part, I find it to be much more worthwhile to actually just increase Yelan's personal damage with the Emblem of Severed Fates, which is what I recommend, and that's the only artifact set on this list that I've given a 5 slime out of 5 slime rating. Now, in terms of stats to prioritize, if you have some energy issues, definitely use an energy recharge timepiece, and you want Hydro Damage Goblets and finally a crit circlet to balance that crit ratio at 1 to 2. In terms of substats, you definitely want to focus on energy recharge, HP percent, crit, and that's pretty much it. Maybe some elemental mastery depending on the teams that she is in. And again, if you have plenty of energy recharge based on your weapon or perhaps a second Hydro on the team, you can consider running an HP percent timepiece in order to maximize her damage that way. Let's keep on moving as fast as Yelan moves us through the overworld by next moving on to the weapons. Now, it's a no-brainer. Her signature weapon, the Aqua Simulacra, is going to be her best weapon by a long stretch. Now, some other great 5-star weapon options are the Hunter's Path. Surprisingly, this provides just as much crit stats as the Aqua Simulacra, although you will probably suffer from overcrit because of this thing, because Yelan's Ascension stat happens to also be crit rate. However, if you do have the artifacts and you don't have the Aqua Simulacra, but you do have the Hunter's Path, and you can stack a bunch of crit damage with her, then the Hunter's Path is a good option because, as you can see, it still adds some all elemental damage bonus to Yelan's kit. Now, of course, its performance will be roughly 10% worse than the Aqua Simulacra. Now, the next weapon that's pretty decent on her is the Polar Star for similar reasons to the Hunter's Path, but do keep in mind that it has higher base attack and lower crit rate, therefore making it a little bit worse than the Hunter's Path, despite their passives basically doing the same thing for Yelan's damage. Up next, we have the Elegy for the End, which is not a good weapon for her damage output, but it is great in terms of her burst uptime because of all the energy recharge it provides, and it is also incredible for supporting your team. Like, for example, Yoimiya could benefit from the increased damage that she gains from vaping off of this, or even Hu Tao. Up next, we have the Favonius Warbow and the Sacrificial Bow. Both these bows are mainly used for additional energy recharge. So yeah, both of these weapons are great for burst uptime, and it's also why I have them pretty high up in this chart, and I'm giving them a 3 slime out of 5 slime rating. Now, the Skyward Harp is probably the next best weapon, which provides some crit rate as well as some crit damage. It's just a no-nonsense stat stick for her, although its base attack is very high, so therefore its crit rate is lower than it could be in comparison to the other weapons. Up next is the Fading Twilight. Fading Twilight has energy recharge, which is nice, and also provides some bonus damage. Both these things are great for Yelan, and yeah, just a simple no-nonsense bow that I'm going to give a 3 slime out of 5 slime rating. We have the Stringless, which does provide a bit more elemental burst damage, especially if you have this thing at refinement 5, and the additional elemental mastery can be useful, for example, if you front load some of her damage with a vape, or for example, if you run her in various other teams like, I don't know, maybe a Fridge or a Nilo team, then the elemental mastery here can be used. Another good weapon is the Moon's Moon, which does provide up to 80% elemental burst damage, and Yelan's elemental burst does cost a nice 70 energy, which is good for this weapon's passive. So, well, that's at refinement 5, but as you can see, this weapon just pretty much provides damage, and unless it's like near refinement 5, I find that the amount of damage that it provides isn't necessarily that great. So for once, I've actually kind of given the Refinement 1 version and Refinement 5 version different ratings here. I've given Refinement 1 a 2 slime, Refinement 5 a 3 slime rating. So we actually have a couple decent 3-star weapons as well, with the Slingshot providing a very nice amount of crit rate. This is more than the Skyward Harp, by the way. And it also provides this passive, which does increase her breakthrough barb damage by a little bit. And we can see that the elemental burst damage that this thing provides is at 78%, which is very close to a Refinement 1 Skyward Harp's damage. So yeah, I mean, it's honestly a very usable weapon on her. And we also have the Recurve Bow, which provides a very chunky amount of HP percent, 46.9%. And similar to the Slingshot, it's just basically a stat stick for her. And this also is performing at roughly the same amount as the Slingshot. Now, some other weapons that are just very briefly worth mentioning include the Thundering Pulse. And after that, perhaps the Alley Hunter is the only other one that I would mention. But, you know, it still is performance similar to the Slingshot in terms of its damage output, so you can't completely write it off when it's at refinement 5. With her weapons out of the way, let's next talk about her constellations. In terms of pull priority, it actually depends what you should prioritize for your account. If you just care about maximizing Yelan's damage, the Aqua Simulacra is probably going to be the way to go. However, in terms of pure utility, and if it were me personally, I would go for her Constellation 1. If you care about the utility as well as getting closer to Constellation 2, as well as the additional energy regen that this thing provides, as well as this thing still boosts your damage, her Constellation 1 is one of the best Constellation 1s in the entire game. Having 2 charges of this thing will let you run in the overworld nonstop for 6 entire seconds, which is quite a long time given how fast Yelan moves during those 6 seconds. We can also see based on this chart that the full rotation, which is her entire combo, will gain about 12% additional damage. So this thing actually does provide significant amounts of additional damage thanks to the free Exquisite Throw that it also happens to activate during her elemental burst. So yeah, her Constellation 1 easily deserves a 5 slime out of 5 slime rating. Up next is her Constellation 2, which provides an additional Exquisite Throw coordinated attack that deals 14% of Yelan's max HP as Hydro damage. Since this effect can trigger every 1.8 seconds, it means that it triggers every other wave of Exquisite Throws for Yelan. What's important to note about this thing is that it also has its own independent ICD, at least I think it has its own independent ICD, and that means that she applies a lot more Hydro as well as does a lot more damage with her Elemental Burst. The amount of additional damage it provides is about 21%, which is a lot, and it also provides 8 additional of these things over the duration of her Elemental Burst. Up next is her Constellation 3, which provides 3 levels to her Elemental Burst. You'll notice that this provides roughly 14% additional damage to her Elemental Burst, or 13% additional damage to her entire kit. Up next is her Constellation 4, which provides 10% additional max HP for your entire team when you hit an enemy with her elemental skill. This can stack up to 4 times if you can hit up to 4 enemies with her 2 charges of her ease, gaining you 40% max HP. Now this is a pretty solid, no-nonsense boost to Yelan's damage, but in this calculation I'm using 40%, and we can see that she gains roughly 15% damage. Now a lot of times, especially against boss fights in Abyss, for example, you only have about 20% additional damage, which makes this much less effective. Still, it's still a great constellation, and it's the only source of HP boosting in the game currently. This will also boost, for example, Nilo's bloom damage, Hu Tao's damage, and whoever else might scale off of HP that want to be used with Yelan. Up next is her Constellation 5, which provides 3 levels to her elemental skill. This provides a pretty small damage gain to her overall rotation, but the reason why I'm still rating this at a very solid 3 slime out of 5 slime rating is because you can vape this thing for a nice amount of front-loaded damage at the beginning of a rotation in certain teams. And last but certainly not the least is her Constellation 6, which turns her normal attacks into these breakthrough enhanced enhanced breakthrough barb damages and up to 5 times. And these also do 156% of a normal breakthrough barb's damage, and this 156% is its own separate multiplier, which makes this even better. Now you might look at this chart and see, okay, this is only like 15% additional damage to her total rotation over the course of like 16.5 seconds. However, keep in mind that this is front loading those 6 breakthrough barbs at the very beginning, or whenever you need them. You can even swap her off and then swap her back on to use these up to 20 seconds later. That's how crazy this constellation is. So yeah, easy 5 slime out of 5 slime rating, literally one of the best constellation 6s in the entire game. Now the last thing to keep in mind is that we can refine the Aqua Simulacra up to refinement 5. This will provide you with a 17% overall damage gain for Yelan. So as usual, up next we need to talk about team building for this character. Now a very popular classic team archetype is going to be a Vape team, like for example Diluc with Yelan, Yoimiya with Yelan. Both of these setups are going to be very, very powerful for Yelan. And another very popular reversed Vape team is a Hu Tao team, and you can even run her with double Hydro like Yelan plus Xingqiu. Another great team for Yelan is the Raiden national team, but instead of Xingqiu you use Yelan. Yelan will provide Raiden with that additional damage bonus, which is always welcome. More damage on Raiden is always incredible, and she'll be able to obviously provide Hydro in order for Xiangling to vape. We also have other types of hyper carries that can use Yelan. Another one is Wander, who does very well with Yelan. And even a character like Xiao can use Yelan to reasonable amounts of efficacy, because you can weave in a normal attack every single time you do a plunge, and you'll still get a good amount of exquisite throws from Yelan. You can also run a Hyper Bloom team. There's no reason why you can't run pretty much any type of Bloom team with Yelan. You can even run a Burgeon team as well with Toma. There's no reason why you can't do this. Yelan is going to do just great when it comes to creating additional blooms for your team. And it goes without saying that this also includes Nilo Bloom teams as well. And you can even run Yelan in a Freeze team, because Yelan's Elemental Burst does apply Hydro in a very nice large area, and you can always use a few normal attacks to keep the exquisite throws going in order to keep your enemies frozen. And one of my personal favorite teams is actually this Mono Hydro team with Kokomi, or honestly just any Hydro DPS character, because it just feels really good not having to worry about any types of rotations. You have infinite energy with 3 Hydro characters. Just swirl and group with an Anemo character and you are good to go. It's a very simple, very intuitive, and very easy playstyle, and it still does a ton of single target damage. So yeah, that wraps up the ultimate guide to Yelan. And I hope you found some of the information in this video helpful. Yelan is obviously an incredibly flexible and powerful character. Basically, any team that you can really use Xingqiu in, you can use Yelan in, and you are very likely to not be disappointed. And I've got a quick little showcase for you guys of both Constellation 0 Yelan as well as Constellation 6 Yelan, and I hope you enjoy it. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Went to Lose, signing out.
雲が借りなくかかれよっみんながそばにいて風を知れ師匠の技を食らいなさどの目が出るいざお道は散らまく惜しみ捕まえた終わりね捕まえた痛がっちゃいない